They say that every house has its secrets. But some secrets are far darker than others. Secrets that cling to the walls. Whispered by the wind. Hidden beneath the floorboards. Waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. This is the story of Greywood Mansion, a place so cursed, so haunted, that its very name sends shivers down the spine of anyone who dares speak it aloud. I've always been a skeptic, you know the type. The one who scoffs at ghost stories. The one who laughs at tales of cursed places. I thought it was all just superstition. Something to scare children or keep the curious at bay. But then, I stepped foot in Greywood. And everything changed. What I found there. What I witnessed, I can't explain. Hell, I still can't fully comprehend it. But you deserve to know the truth. You deserve to hear the horror that waits in the shadows of that forsaken place. Let me take you back to that night. The night I walked into Greywood Mansion for the very first time. It was a cold night in late October. The rain had been relentless for days. And the wind seemed to scream through the trees, carrying with it a feeling of something unnatural. I was driving alone, just passing through, when I saw it, Greywood Mansion, sitting atop that hill, shrouded in mist. It looked like a relic from another time. A forgotten monument to history, or perhaps something worse. My curiosity got the better of me. I had to see it for myself. At first, it seemed like any other old house. The air was thick with dust. The furniture covered in sheets. A few scattered pieces of shattered glass lay on the floor. But the further I explored, the more I felt it, the heaviness in the air, the feeling of being watched. I dismissed it, of course. I told myself it was just the wind or the eerie silence that seemed to swallow every sound. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. And that was when I saw it. A painting, an old, faded portrait, hanging crookedly on the wall. It was of a man. No, not just any man. The eyes in that painting, they followed me. Shifted with every step I took. They burned into me. I tried to look away. But something kept pulling me back to those eyes. As if they were begging for attention. Whispering secrets. Secrets that they knew I wasn't ready to hear. I tried to leave, but the door, it wouldn't budge. The wind outside had picked up, and the mansion seemed to groan, as if it were alive, as if it were trying to keep me in. And that's when the whispers began. Low, guttural voices, coming from every direction. They spoke in a language I couldn't understand. But the terror they invoked was undeniable. I felt my pulse quicken, my body frozen in place. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. It was as if the mansion had stolen my voice, stolen my breath. I was not alone. The house, it was never empty. There were others who had been trapped here long before me. I felt them, felt their presence. Their cold fingers brushing against my skin. Their hollow eyes watching me from the corners of the rooms. I tried to run, but no matter which way I turned, I found myself back in the same spot. It was as if the house was toying with me, playing with my mind, warping reality itself. And then I found it. The truth, hidden beneath the floorboards. A journal. It belonged to a man who had once lived here, a man whose name I later learned was Alexander Greywood. He wrote about the mansion, about its origins, about the curse that had followed his family for generations. He spoke of the spirits trapped in this house, spirits that would never rest until they had claimed another soul. I knew, in that moment, that I was not just a visitor. I was a target, a sacrifice in a long-forgotten ritual. But it didn't end there. No, the mansion, it wanted something from me. Something that even I couldn't comprehend. The spirits, they started to speak to me directly now. Their voices clearer, their demands louder. They told me I could escape. But only if I did what they wanted. Only if I gave them what they needed. What they had been waiting for centuries. And that was when I saw them. The figures, the ones who had died here. They reached out to me. Their hands cold and lifeless. And in that moment, I realized I had been too late. The curse had already begun. The mansion had claimed me, just as it had claimed all those before me. The question was no longer whether I could escape, but if I wanted to escape. I don't know how much longer I can keep talking. The spirits, they're getting closer. I can feel their cold breath on my neck. I can hear their footsteps in the dark. And I know, deep down, they're coming for me. They're coming for all of us. And you're next. Remember, never step foot in Greywood Mansion. It's too late for me. But for you, there's still time to turn back. You've heard the warnings. You've felt the chills running down your spine. Haven't you? But still, you're here. Listening, watching, curious about what happens next. You want to know what's really going on in Greywood, don't you? I don't blame you. But let me tell you this. There's no going back now. Not after what I've seen. What we've all seen. The spirits. The whispers. They're real. And the curse? It's not just some old tale to scare children. It's a living, breathing nightmare that has trapped the souls of the Greywood family for generations. Those poor souls, they don't want peace. No, they want something far worse. And now, they've set their sights on me, and on you. Do you hear that? The footsteps. They're getting closer. The walls. They're closing in. And I can feel it in my bones. Something is coming. Something that shouldn't exist. Something that was born from the twisted hearts of the Greywood family themselves. And it's hungry. Hungry for more than just souls. It's hungry for the one thing it hasn't had in all these years: redemption. You see, the mansion isn't just haunted. It's a prison. A prison for the souls of the family who built it. Souls bound by a deal with something ancient and unforgiving. The Greywoods, they were the keepers of a secret so dangerous, so powerful, that it could tear apart the very fabric of reality itself. And I'm now the keeper of their mistakes. That night, the night I stumbled into Greywood, I unknowingly triggered something long buried beneath its decaying floors. And that's when it happened. That's when he found me. The man from the portrait. Alexander Greywood. He's the one they say is the key. The one who can either unleash the curse forever, or trap us all in this nightmare for eternity. And I've become his obsession. The more I try to escape, the stronger his pull becomes. I can feel his presence. His eyes watching me from every corner. From every shadow. It's as if he knows. As if he's waiting for me to make the wrong move. But the worst part? The worst part is that I don't even know what he wants from me. Why me? Why now? I never asked for any of this. The house is shifting. The walls are alive. Shifting in ways they shouldn't. The air's thick with something I can't explain. There are sounds now, strange and guttural, coming from below. And the house, it's moving. You don't believe me, do you? Well, let me show you. This is where it all begins. Where the curse first took hold. The first step was taken long before my arrival. But I've become part of it. This door, This hallway, it's the threshold. The final barrier between us and them. The spirits. The gray woods. And once we cross it, there's no turning back. The house will have us. We'll become part of the curse. Lost forever in the shadows. You're still here? You're still listening? You're either brave or foolish. I don't know which one you are. But you must understand, once you step into this world, it's already too late. We're all bound to this place. Bound by the whispers, the curse, the darkness. If you leave, it'll follow you. Just as it's following me. No, I can't stay here any longer. They're coming. They're coming for me. And they'll come for you. Too. If you don't leave now. Leave. Run. The curse is coming for both of us, and you've been warned. They're coming. They're coming. The door slammed shut behind me with a deafening bang. The sound of it reverberating through the house like a drumbeat of doom. For a split second, I thought I had imagined it, after all. The tension in this house played tricks on your senses, but the cold, metallic scent of fear in the air told me otherwise. I quickly spun around, my breath caught in my throat as I tried to steady myself. Don't look back. That was the one thing I told myself as I stepped forward into the pitch-black hallway that seemed to stretch endlessly in front of me. The walls here were different. Strange symbols were carved into the wood, half buried under layers of dust, as though they had been waiting for centuries to be uncovered. They didn't seem to belong to any known language. And yet, their presence felt alive. I couldn't focus on them. The shadows, the whispers, they were all growing louder with each step. Something was watching me, waiting for me to make a mistake. I had barely made it a few feet when I felt a chill run down my spine, followed by a soft, almost imperceptible sound, like the scurrying of rats, but much too deliberate, much too intelligent. I turned, and for a moment, I thought I saw something move in the corner of my eye. A figure, just out of reach of the light, standing still in the dark. A silhouette. My heart raced, and I tried to steady my breathing. It's just my mind playing tricks on me, I thought, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. Something was there. Something, not human. Is anyone there? I whispered, my voice a broken rasp that seemed so out of place in the silence. My words lingered in the air like a haunting. But the only reply I received was the faint sound of breathing, slow, deliberate, and just behind me. I whipped around, but again, there was nothing. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as a gust of wind swept through the corridor, sending chills down my spine. But it wasn't just the cold that caused the shiver, it was the scent. A foul, rotting odor filled my nostrils, like something dead had been left to decay in the walls for centuries. I staggered back, my hand instinctively clutching the nearest thing, a rusted candlestick, almost as if I could use it to defend myself. But deep down, I knew that nothing would stop what was coming. Not the candlestick, not the whispers. Not even my desperate prayers. And that's when I heard it. A sound so unnatural it made my stomach churn. A low, guttural laugh. I spun toward the source of the sound, my eyes straining in the darkness. The laughter echoed through the empty halls, bouncing off the walls like it came from every direction at once. It was a laughter that should have belonged to a man. But the tone, it was wrong. Twisted, like the laugh of something that had died long ago but still found joy in tormenting the living. A shadow moved, shifted, in the dark. It wasn't just a figure this time. It was something more. Something that had been watching me. Something that had been waiting. I took a step back. Then another. But my feet felt like they were stuck in mud. A cold sweat broke out across my forehead as I realized I couldn't move fast enough. Not fast enough to escape. Suddenly, the shadow lunged forward, slamming into me with the force of a freight train. I gasped. The air knocked out of my lungs as I collided with the cold stone floor. The world spun, everything a blur, and before I could register what was happening, I felt it, something pressing down on my chest. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't scream. A hand, a cold, dead hand wrapped around my throat. Squeezing, I clawed at it, but the grip was unyielding. Like iron. I'm going to die here. That thought hit me like a bolt of lightning. I had heard about hauntings. People said they could feel the presence of spirits, of shadows. But this wasn't a spirit. This was something much darker. Much more ancient. A voice whispered in my ear. A voice that wasn't my own. Welcome to your end. With what little strength I had left, I managed to turn my head, catching a glimpse of what loomed over me. A face. A grotesque face that looked like it had been twisted beyond recognition. The skin was gray and decayed. The eyes hollow but burning with an unnatural, fiery glow. And that smile. It was a smile I would never forget. Even if I lived 1,000 years. Alexander Greywood. I choked out a breath. Fighting with everything I had. And just as I thought I was going to lose consciousness, the pressure on my chest suddenly lifted. I gasped for air, my lungs burning. My eyes watered as I struggled to focus. My vision still hazy. But the thing, it was still there. Standing over me, watching. I staggered to my feet. My heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't stay here. I couldn't. But where could I go? That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The walls. They were closing in. The house was shifting. Moving. I looked toward the far end of the hallway, where a door stood ajar, beckoning me. Without thinking, I bolted toward it, not caring about what lay beyond. All that mattered was escaping, getting out of this hellhole. But as I reached for the doorknob, something stopped me. A voice, a cold whisper that seemed to come from all around me. There's nowhere to run. The door slammed shut on its own, trapping me inside. The room I found myself in was completely different. It was dark, but the air was thick, oppressive, and filled with the unmistakable smell of something decayed. This room, it wasn't a part of the mansion I had seen before. There were no windows, no light, only shadows that seemed to writhe and breathe. And then, I saw it, on the far wall, a portrait of a man, no, a thing. Its eyes were wide open. Its mouth stretched into an impossible grin. And in its hands was the very thing I feared the most. The key to whatever Alexander Greywood had been searching for all these years. I'm not alone, I realized too late. I'm never going to be free. The shadows closed in around me again. I could hear the sound of whispers, of footsteps, no, scratching. Like claws against the stone. But this time, I didn't scream. No, I was too afraid to scream. Because deep down, I knew the truth. I was already lost. I couldn't breathe. The air felt thick, as though it were suffocating me. It was not just the lack of oxygen, but something deeper, something unseen that weighed down on my chest. Pressing in from every direction. Alexander Greywood, the name echoed in my mind. over and over again, as though it had been branded there by the very house I had foolishly walked into. The portrait on the far wall, the ghastly image of that thing, stared back at me. Its hollow, empty eyes felt like they were drilling into my soul. And that twisted smile? It made my stomach churn. Why was this here? Why was it watching me? What did it want from me? I looked around the room. The air seemed to vibrate with a hum I couldn't place. But I could feel it, like a vibration in my bones. The walls themselves were breathing, shifting, as though the house itself had a life of its own, a dark, sentient life that fed off of fear and torment. Every step I took seemed to disturb the ground beneath me, the floor creaking in protest as if warning me to stop. But I couldn't. I had no choice but to move forward, to try and understand what the hell was going on. And then, I heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind me. Soft, slow, deliberate, the kind of footsteps that didn't belong to any living thing. My pulse quickened, my instincts screaming at me to turn and run. But my body refused. My feet were glued to the floor, frozen in place by some unseen force. No, I can't be trapped here. I need to get out. I need to survive. But then I realized, the whispers had returned. Low, hollow, calling me. They came from all directions, filling the room, getting louder and louder with each passing second. I pressed my hands to my ears, trying to block them out. But it was no use. The voices were inside my head, speaking to me in a language I didn't understand. I turned, finally breaking free from the paralysis, and found myself face to face with the thing in the portrait. It wasn't just a painting. It moved. The eyes that had once been painted in stillness now shifted, tracking my every movement. I stumbled back, my legs shaking, but the thing in the painting grinned wider. Its lips cracked open, revealing jagged teeth that seemed too sharp to belong to anything human. "Help me," the voice came from the portrait. A voice that wasn't just a whisper, but a shrill cry, like the sound of something being tortured. My heart skipped a beat, and I felt my entire body stiffen with dread. I didn't know who, or what, had spoken. But it didn't matter. The voice was in my mind now, and I couldn't escape it. It was like a parasite, burrowing into my thoughts. I gasped, clutching my head. It was as if the room itself was closing in around me. Every surface seemed to warp, distort. The walls stretched, twisted, contorted in ways they shouldn't. The ceiling lowered, pressing down on me with an invisible force. I was trapped. There was no way out. But then, I heard something else. Footsteps. But this time, they were real footsteps. A shadow appeared at the far end of the room, moving closer with a slow, deliberate pace. It was a figure, a man. But not a man, not fully. His face was obscured by a black hood, his features hidden beneath the dark cloth. Yet, I could feel his presence. The overwhelming darkness that followed him like a cloud. The figure stopped just a few feet away from me. I could see his hands now, long, bony fingers that twitched, like they were longing to grab me. His mouth was barely visible beneath the hood. But when he spoke, it was like the very air around us shifted. "She's waiting," he said. His voice was smooth, yet carried an unmistakable coldness. "Who?" I wanted to ask, but my voice faltered. My mouth felt dry, as though I couldn't speak. I was paralyzed with fear. I wanted to run, to scream, to do anything, but I was frozen. She waits in the heart of the house," he continued, his eyes glinting through the shadows of his hood. "Waiting for the key to her freedom." His words hung in the air like a heavy fog, clouding my thoughts. I couldn't understand. Who was waiting? What key? The figure took a step forward. And with that simple motion, the world seemed to break open. The walls around us cracked, as though they were being ripped apart by some unseen force. I could hear the house screaming, the very foundation groaning as though it were alive and in pain. "Follow me," the figure whispered, and despite every instinct telling me to run the other way, I did. I followed him. I didn't know why. There was something about his voice, something hypnotic about his words that made me take the first step. And then another. The corridor ahead was like a tunnel, a long, narrow passage that stretched far beyond what I could see. As I followed the figure, the air grew colder, more oppressive. The walls seemed to narrow around me, the darkness swallowing me whole. I could hear something, breathing. It was not the wind. It was not the house. It was something else. The figure walked ahead, his steps echoing off the walls. But soon, they stopped. A strange, unnatural silence filled the corridor. I looked up, and there, at the end of the passage, was a door. The same door that had appeared in the portrait. The door to whatever nightmare awaited me. The figure turned to face me, his expression unreadable, but I could feel it, a cold, malevolent presence radiating from him. He wasn't here to help me. He was here to use me. "Do you wish to find the key?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. I nodded, unable to do anything but follow his command. He smiled, but it wasn't a smile of kindness. It was a smile of someone who knew far more than he let on, someone who had seen far too much. "You won't like what you find," he said ominously. With that, the door creaked open. I stepped forward, my heart hammering in my chest. I couldn't turn back now. I had come too far. There was no escaping what lay beyond. The door opened wide, revealing a room that shouldn't have existed, a room that was never meant to be found. The walls were lined with mirrors, each one cracked and shattered, reflecting a distorted version of myself. The air was thick with a foul, metallic scent, but it wasn't the scent that terrified me. It was the thing standing in the center of the room. A woman. Her skin was pale, translucent, as if she were made of smoke. Her eyes were black as coal. Hollow, endless voids that seemed to consume everything in their gaze. Her mouth was twisted into an agonizing scream, but no sound came out. And yet, I could hear her. I could hear her in my mind. Her voice screaming at me to release her, to free her from her prison. She was waiting for the key to her freedom, and I held it in my hand. As the door swung open, my breath caught in my throat, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't look away from the room, from the woman standing in the center, her silhouette hauntingly blurred, as though she existed on the edge of the world, straddling the line between the living and the dead. The mirrors surrounding her reflected not just my own image, but the twisted, warped versions of myself. Versions that stared back at me with eyes full of fear. Eyes full of understanding. She wasn't like the figures I'd seen before. Shadows that danced at the corner of my vision or painted faces that grinned eerily from the walls. No, this woman, this thing, was different. There was a pulse to her, a presence that resonated deeper than the shadows that filled the house. Her skin glowed with a faint, ghostly light, a pale sheen that flickered like the last light of a dying candle. And her eyes, they weren't just black, they were endless, sucking me in, pulling me deeper into the void. Her mouth stretched into that silent scream again. But this time it wasn't just an image. I could hear it, I could feel it. It reverberated in the core of my being, vibrating every atom in my body. The room seemed to collapse in on itself, the walls shifting, the mirrors distorting as if they were trying to escape her gaze. I took a step forward, against my will, as though something inside me was compelled to get closer, to understand what she wanted. And then she spoke, but not with her lips. Her voice came from the air itself, from the very fabric of the room. It was cold, like ice scraping against bone. Her words echoed in my head, sharper than a blade. "Release me." My knees buckled beneath me as the weight of her voice, her presence, crushed down on me. I could feel my body trembling, not from the cold, but from the sheer force of her power, radiating outwards, trying to make me part of her torment. The figure, the man in the hooded cloak, standing silently in the doorway, watched, his cold, dark eyes following me with a look of amusement. He had led me here. He had known. "She's waiting," he had said, but now, it was clear, she was not waiting for my help. She was waiting for my destruction. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, my hands shaking as I held the key, the cold, metallic object that seemed to pulse with a rhythm of its own, as though it too was alive, just like the thing in the room with me. Was this the key to her freedom? Or was it the key to my damnation? She reached for it, her hand stretching unnaturally long, her fingers like claws, grasping at the air as though she could feel the key, even from a distance. "Give it to me," she whispered, her voice like a soft breeze, but it wasn't soft. It was a command, a demand that shook me to my very core. My body screamed in protest, but my hand moved of its own accord, pulling the key from my pocket, the metal cold and heavy in my grip. With a slow, deliberate motion, I took a step forward. The moment my foot crossed the threshold of the room, the temperature plummeted, and the lights flickered, casting the mirrors in shadow. It was as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for what would happen next. I couldn't see her face, but I could feel her gaze, her hunger, and it devoured me. "Release me," she whispered again, but this time, her voice came with an edge that made my skin crawl. "Release me, or be consumed." I shook my head, my breath quickening. Was I supposed to let her out? Was I supposed to open this damn door to a nightmare that could destroy everything? But just as I was about to make my move, just as I was about to approach her, the mirrors shattered. A piercing sound filled the air, louder than thunder, as the glass exploded, sending shards flying in every direction. I screamed as one piece of glass grazed my cheek, drawing a thin line of blood. But the scream of agony that filled the air wasn't mine. It was hers. The woman's body convulsed, twisted, as if something inside her was being born. The air became thick, almost suffocating, as if the space itself was closing in on me. The figure in the doorway stepped back, his hooded eyes gleaming with something far darker than amusement, anticipation. She was no longer the woman I had seen before. No, now, she was something else entirely. Her body grew, stretched, and morphed before my very eyes. Her limbs lengthened, her fingers turning into gnarled, twisting claws that scraped at the floor like the sound of chalk on a blackboard. Her mouth, still open in that terrible, silent scream, began to bleed. Dark, viscous liquid poured from her, dripping to the floor, pooling around her feet. The air hummed with the power she had unlocked. "You shouldn't have come," the voice in my head whispered. I could no longer tell if it was her voice or my own. The walls of the room seemed to pulse, like they were alive, responding to the chaos she was unleashing. I took a step back, but my foot caught on something, the shards of glass that littered the floor. I stumbled, my balance lost, and I crashed into the ground. The key, the cold, metallic key, slipped from my hand and fell to the floor with a sharp clink. And in that moment, the air shifted again. A wave of force erupted from the woman, blasting me backward with the force of 1,000 storms. I collided with the wall, my head ringing, my vision spinning. I could hear her now, her voice filling every crevice of my mind. So powerful, so forceful, that I could barely keep my grip on reality. "You brought me here, and now you will suffer for it." The room began to distort. The walls shifted again, moving like liquid. The mirrors that had shattered earlier began to reassemble themselves, fusing back together with terrifying speed, as if the woman was weaving them into something more. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know what I had unleashed. But I did know one thing. I had to escape. I had to get out of this nightmare before it consumed me whole. But as I stood up, trying to steady myself, the room began to close in on me. The mirrors, the woman, the walls, everything was coming at me, pressing in. I had no way out. And then I saw it. A dark, shrouded figure appeared in the corner of the room, half hidden in shadow. At first, I thought it was the man in the hood. But no, this was different. This wasn't a man at all. It was something far worse. A long, twisted form stepped forward, its skin black as night, its eyes glowing with an eerie green light. Its mouth opened, and from within, there was a sound, a deep, guttural growl that vibrated the walls, rattling the mirrors. It wasn't just the woman I had unleashed. It was everything. The house, the room, the curse. They were all connected. And now, I was part of it. In the next moments, everything became a blur. The darkness closed in on me, suffocating me, as the shadows shifted and began to take shape. The woman's eyes were everywhere, behind me, around me, within the mirrors, and in the twisted shapes of the shadows themselves. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only feel the crushing weight of her rage. But just as I thought I was about to lose myself completely to the horrors of the house, I saw the figure again, the man with the hood. He wasn't here to save me. He never was. He was here to make sure I stayed. And with that, the darkness swallowed me whole. The room, the house, it's still here. And as I sit in the quiet darkness, I can hear it, the subtle whispers, the scratching against the walls, the soft, almost imperceptible sound of the mirrors shattering. Again, it's as though the house never truly lets go. Always watching, always waiting for the next soul to wander too close, too curious. And I never really left. Not completely. My heart is still racing. My breath still short. But I know there's something worse than death in that house. Something much darker. Something that feeds on fear. And I can feel it, whispering in my ear right now. A warning, an invitation, maybe It's watching. But here's the thing, and I'll leave you with this. Do you think you can escape? Perhaps, like me, you'll feel the pull, the draw to that place, to the whispers, to the darkness. Maybe you'll go just to see for yourself. But remember, once you step inside, it's not just the house you have to worry about. You might be running from something far worse than the nightmares. Maybe you'll survive, maybe you won't, but whatever happens, one thing is certain, the house will always want more. So, until next time, when we meet again, remember this warning. Don't look into the mirrors too long. If you want to hear more stories like this one, and if you're brave enough to face the horrors that lie ahead, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear if you've had any encounters of your own, or if you're ready to face the house. But be careful, once you get too close, there might be no turning back. See you in the next one, if you dare. Don't forget to subscribe. If you're still here, it means you're curious. And remember, curiosity can be deadly. The story you've just heard may have left you with chills. But beneath the layers of fear and darkness, there is an important lesson we can all apply in our lives. In the end, it's not the house or the haunting that holds the greatest power, it's our own fear, our curiosity, and our choices that shape our reality. Much like in the story, we often find ourselves drawn to the unknown, driven by a desire to understand or conquer what seems terrifying. But, just as the characters learned, there are things in life that are better left undisturbed. Things that can consume us if we push too far. Sometimes, the real danger lies not in what we face, but in how we choose to confront it. It's a reminder to trust our instincts, to know when to step back, and to recognize that not every challenge is meant to be faced head-on. So, as you go about your day, ask yourself, what fears or unknowns am I facing right now? Are they worth exploring, or should I trust my inner voice to guide me toward safer paths? Fear isn't always something to fight, sometimes it's something to understand and respect.